July 14th, 1988. Wembley Stadium, London. The summer air hung thick with anticipation as 50,000 souls stood shoulder to shoulder in the massive arena. The Bad World Tour had already broken records across the globe, but tonight was special, a collaboration that few had dared to dream possible. Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder, two titans of music, sharing the same stage for a one-night-only performance that promised to be the stuff of legend. The evening had progressed like a dream, each song more electric than the last. Michael's rhinestone-studded black jacket caught the light as he moved with inhuman precision across the stage, while Stevie's fingers danced across the keyboard with the intuitive genius that had made him a legend in his own right. The crowd swayed as one organism, connected by invisible threads of melody and rhythm. Backstage, crew members who had seen it all stood transfixed, knowing they were witnessing something historic. Even the security team, hardened by years of concert duty, found themselves stealing glances at the stage between scans of the crowd. It was during a brief pause between songs, that small exhale of collective breath before the next musical ascent, when it happened. A voice cut through the momentary silence, loud and discordant, slicing through the magical atmosphere like a dull blade. "You're overrated, both of you." The words echoed across the stadium, amplified by the sudden stillness. A spotlight swung wildly, searching for the source, finally landing on a man in the front section. He stood unsteadily, a beer bottle dangling from his fingers, his face contorted with the particular courage that comes from too many drinks and too little sense. "My 5-year-old plays better piano," he continued, gesturing wildly towards Stevie. "And you," he pointed at Michael, beer sloshing over the rim of his bottle. "I've seen better dancing at my local pub." The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral, a wave of boos and shouts, calls for security to remove the man. People nearest to him edged away, creating a small island of space around him. Security was already moving, their walkie-talkies crackling with urgent communications. On stage, Michael and Stevie remained still, illuminated by the harsh white of the spotlights. The band looked to them for direction, instruments poised in uncertain hands. A technician's finger hovered over a button that would cue the next song, potentially drowning out the disruption. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. It could have gone so many ways, security removing the heckler, the show continuing as if nothing had happened, perhaps even an angry response from the artists or their entourage. What happened instead would be recounted in music circles for decades to come. Michael stepped forward to the edge of the stage, his movements fluid and deliberate. He raised a hand, signaling security to pause. The gesture was small, but in that vast arena, with thousands of eyes upon him, it carried the weight of a command. "Bring him up," Michael said, his voice soft yet somehow reaching every corner of the stadium through his microphone. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Backstage, the tour manager frantically signaled against it, making slashing motions across his throat. This was unprecedented, unplanned, unpredictable. Everything a carefully choreographed world tour sought to avoid. But Michael's gaze remained steady, his hands still raised in that gentle command. Stevie, though unable to see the unfolding drama, sensed the shift in energy. He leaned toward his own microphone. "Yes," he agreed, his trademark smile spreading across his face. "Bring our friend up here." The security team exchanged glances, years of training conflicting with direct instructions from the artists they were there to protect. After a moment's hesitation, 2 guards approached the heckler, who now looked considerably less confident as the spotlight continued to illuminate his increasingly sheepish expression. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the man was escorted not out of the venue, but toward the stage. A stagehand quickly appeared with a small staircase, positioned at the edge of the massive platform. The heckler climbed the steps with the careful deliberation of someone suddenly, painfully sober, the weight of 50,000 stares pressing upon him like a physical force. Up close, under the unforgiving lights, he appeared younger than he had seemed from a distance. Perhaps in his late 20s, his hair disheveled, his eyes wide with the dawning realization of what was happening. Michael approached him with the same grace he brought to every movement, extending a hand gloved in signature white sequins. The heckler stared at the offered hand as if it might bite him, then slowly, tentatively, reached out to shake it. The touch seemed to pass through him like an electric current. Many in the front rows would later swear they saw the exact moment sobriety hit him fully, a visible straightening of his spine, a clearing of his eyes. Stevie had risen from his keyboard and was being gently guided toward them by a stagehand. He too extended his hand, which the heckler shook with the reverence of someone being granted an audience with royalty. All traces of his earlier bravado evaporated like morning mist under a harsh sun. Michael leaned in close to the man's ear, saying something the microphones didn't catch. The heckler nodded repeatedly, his face a complex map of emotions, embarrassment, awe, and something that looked remarkably like the beginning of tears. Then Michael stepped back and addressed the crowd, his voice carrying clear and strong across the stadium. "This gentleman thinks he can do better," he said, not a hint of anger in his tone. "I believe everyone deserves a chance to shine." The crowd's reaction was mixed, uncertain murmurs, a few supportive cheers, and more than a few called for the show to continue without this unexpected interruption. Michael raised his hand again, and the stadium fell silent. It was a testament to his command of the space, his innate understanding of the relationship between performer and audience. "Music," Michael continued, "has always been about breaking barriers, about bringing people together who might otherwise remain apart." He gestured towards Stevie. "My brother here has taught the world that limitations exist only in the mind." Stevie nodded, his unseeing eyes somehow finding Michael unerringly, a lifetime of navigating the world without sight having gifted him with an almost supernatural spatial awareness. "And I've learned," Michael went on, "that sometimes the greatest moments come from the most unexpected places." He turned to the heckler. "What's your name, friend?" The man swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper as he leaned toward the microphone Michael offered. "James," he said, the single word nearly breaking with emotion. "James Miller." Michael nodded, as if the name confirmed something he already knew. "Well, James Miller," he said, "today you get to be part of something special." With that, he gestured to the band, who looked at each other in confusion. This wasn't part of the set list, wasn't rehearsed, wasn't planned. The musical director stepped forward, a questioning look on his face. Michael leaned in, whispered something, and understanding dawned. The director turned to the band, gave a series of quick hand signals, and suddenly the opening notes of "We Are the World" filled the stadium. It was a song Michael had co-written with Lionel Richie for the USA for Africa Charity Supergroup. A song about unity, about coming together across differences. The choice could not have been more perfect, more poignant. Stevie found his way back to the keyboard, his fingers finding the right keys as if drawn there by magnetic force. The familiar melody rose and swelled, filling every corner of the massive space. And then Michael did something truly extraordinary. He handed James, the heckler who moments ago had been hurling insults, a microphone of his own. The look on James's face was one of pure terror. He shook his head frantically, trying to hand the microphone back, but Michael gently refused. Instead, he began to sing, his voice rising clear and strong on the first verse. Then, as the chorus approached, he gestured to James, an invitation impossible to refuse. What happened next stunned everyone, none more so than James himself. His voice, hesitant at first, joined with Michael's. It wasn't a trained voice, wasn't perfect by any standard, but it was honest, raw with emotion and the surreal reality of the moment he found himself in. Michael nodded encouragement, his own voice supporting, not overpowering, creating a safe space for this unexpected duet. Stevie joined in, his soulful tones adding depth and richness. The band, professional to the core, adjusted their playing to complement the untrained voice now center stage. By the second chorus, something remarkable was happening. James's voice grew stronger, more confident. His terror receded, replaced by a kind of wonder. And the crowd, initially skeptical, began to respond. Hands raised across the stadium. Lighters flickered to life in the darkness beyond the stage. 50,000 voices joined in, a massive choir united by a song that had always been about bringing people together, about recognizing our shared humanity. In the middle section of the stadium, a young woman named Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she swayed with the music. Tomorrow, she would tell her colleagues at work about this moment, but her words would feel inadequate, unable to capture the pure emotion that coursed through the arena. 20 years later, she would tell her children, "I was there the night Michael Jackson turned hatred into harmony." Her story would be just one of thousands, each person carrying away their own version of the miracle they had witnessed. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more moments that reveal the true character of Michael Jackson. Not just as an artist of unparalleled talent, but as a human being capable of transforming conflict into connection with a generosity of spirit too often overlooked in the narratives surrounding his legacy. And if you were ever fortunate enough to witness Michael perform live, or if this story reminds you of a moment when music bridged an impossible divide in your own life, please share your experience in the comments below. Your memories help keep the true spirit of Michael's legacy alive. As the song reached its climax, tears streamed openly down James's face. Whatever demon had driven him to lash out earlier had been thoroughly exorcised, replaced by something that looked remarkably like joy. Michael placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that said more than words ever could. The final notes echoed through the stadium, giving way to a moment of profound silence. That rare, perfect stillness that sometimes follows when art has touched something essential in the human spirit. Then the applause began. It started slowly, a scattered clapping that quickly built to a thunderous ovation. The crowd rose to their feet as one body, their cheers reaching a volume that threatened to drown out the stadium's sound system. A journalist present that night would later write that it wasn't merely applause for a performance. It was a recognition of something more profound, a moment of grace that transcended entertainment and entered the realm of the spiritual. James stood transfixed, the microphone hanging loosely at his side, his expression that of a man who has unexpectedly glimpsed something transcendent. Security approached again, this time to escort him back to his seat, but before they could reach him, James turned to Michael and Stevie. The microphones were still on, capturing his words for the entire stadium to hear. "I'm sorry," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong. So wrong." Michael's response was equally simple. He removed the single white sequin glove from his hand, that iconic symbol recognized around the world, and pressed it into James's palm, closing the man's fingers around it. "Keep this," Michael said. "And remember that music isn't about being better than someone else. It's about being better together." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. That glove, perhaps the most recognized piece of musical memorabilia in the world, freely given to someone who moments before had been an adversary. It wasn't just a gesture of forgiveness. It was a radical act of inclusion, of turning an enemy into a friend. As James was escorted back to his seat, clutching the glove as if it were made of fragile glass rather than sturdy fabric and sequins, the energy in the stadium had transformed. What had been merely an excellent concert had become something approaching the sacred, a moment when the boundaries between performer and audience, between celebrity and ordinary human, had briefly dissolved, revealing the deeper connection that great art makes possible. The show continued, of course. Michael and Stevie performed their planned duets, each song received with renewed appreciation by an audience now bonded by the unexpected emotional journey they had shared. But everyone present knew that something unique had happened, something that transcended the music itself. Backstage after the show, the tour manager approached Michael, clipboard in hand, prepared to discuss the schedule for the next day's travel. But Michael wasn't ready to move on just yet. "Find him," he said simply. The manager didn't need to ask who. 20 minutes later, James was brought to Michael's dressing room. No longer drunk, deeply embarrassed, but still clutching the sequin glove. What was said in that private conversation has never been fully revealed. James Miller has given only a few interviews over the years, and he speaks of that night with a reverence that suggests it marked a turning point in his life. In one rare television appearance 5 years after the concert, James revealed a detail that hadn't been shared before. He told me something that night that changed everything for me. James said, his voice still carrying traces of wonder. He said that his greatest performances always came after his biggest mistakes, that every stumble taught him a new dance move. I realized he wasn't just talking about performing. He was talking about life. What is known is that 6 months later, James Miller enrolled in a music therapy program. Today, he runs a nonprofit organization that brings music education to disadvantaged youth across the UK. On his office wall hangs a framed white glove behind glass. A reminder, he says, that a single moment of grace can change the trajectory of a life. And that sometimes the most powerful response to hostility is not further hostility, but an unexpected invitation to connect. As for Michael and Stevie, that night at Wembley became part of their shared legend. In later interviews, when asked about their most memorable performances, both would mention London, 1988, with knowing smiles. Neither took credit for what happened. As Stevie would later put it, some nights, the music takes over and reminds us why we do what we do. That was one of those nights. Years later, after Michael's tragic death in 2009, among the thousands of tributes that poured in was a simple bouquet of white lilies sent to the memorial service. The card read, "Thank you for seeing more in me than I saw in myself." James Miller, in a private collection in London, carefully preserved and rarely displayed, there exists a ticket stub from that Wembley concert. Written on the back in Michael's distinctive handwriting are the words, "Remember, our purpose is not to impress, but to connect." Perhaps no other phrase better captures the lesson of that night. The night when a Heckler's challenge became an opportunity for transformation, when 50,000 people witnessed not just legendary performers at the height of their powers, but the even rarer spectacle of genuine human connection bridging the divide of misunderstanding. In a world that often rewards competition and conflict, it stands as a reminder that sometimes the most stunning victory is not defeating an adversary, but transforming them into a friend.